Well, good morning to you, and thank you for joining me today as we come back to Genesis to spend some time in the truth. We are working our way through Genesis 49, where we have the blessings pronounced by Jacob upon his sons. We are down today to Joseph. Joseph's blessing will come represented in verses 22 through 26 of Genesis 49. We all can think back on the experiences of Joseph, what God did in his life to get him to the place where he wanted him to be, or ultimately God would use him in a great way to preserve even his people. And so the blessing that comes from Jacob is going to reflect on both the past of Joseph and the future of Joseph. And so we're going to look today at verses 22 through 26. So it begins with the first illustration in verses 22 and 23, 24. It all starts with this picture of Joseph being as a war implement, a bow, and the struggles that Joseph faced in his life are going to be pictured in these verses. So he says in verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. Sorry, I got myself ahead. It starts out with the branch illustration here in verse 22. Then in verses 23 and 24, he talks about the archer. The idea of a fruitful bough or a fruitful bough by a spring that grows over the wall. As we look at that picture, the first aspect of the blessing appears to me as though it looks at Joseph's current situation. God has blessed Joseph abundantly in his position as the appointed second most important person in Egypt to preserve the nation of Egypt and others through the wise direction, through the time of bounty and the time of famine. And so that's what it appears to me as though Joseph is being described now with where he currently is. So he is a fruitful bough, not just a fruitful bough, not just a bough that produces an abundance, but a bough that produces an abundance as though it was planted next to a spring, which means it's constantly being fed, it's constantly getting enough water, it's constantly in a position where it has the best opportunity to bear fruit. And again, as I look at that, I see Joseph's current situation. He is in a position where he is able to continue to grow and to influence others around him. And it's just that he's expanding and expanding and expanding his influence, even in Egypt, as well as over his brothers in the family of Jacob, to the point where his branches are described as running over the wall. They're growing outside of the confines of the orchard. They're beginning to expand outside of that. And so when you think about it, Joseph's influence expanded beyond Egypt and expanded into Canaan and probably into other parts of the world as the famine was so great on the earth. And so I just see this as Jacob looking at Joseph's current position and situation. And that's exactly what he looks like. He looks like this blossoming, fruitful vine that continues to grow, that it continues to be fed, and it grows outside of its confines. And it very well, in my mind, could picture Joseph's effect as God used him to preserve the lives of people through the time of famine. And then in verse 23 and 24, he switches the word picture here, or the illustration, to that of a bow. And here he's looking back. And we know that because the verb is past tense. So verse 23 says, the archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. And so we're looking backwards now at the adversity that Joseph faced, both in his brothers selling him into slavery to begin with, and then the accusation by Potiphar's wife, which was not true in any way, shape, or form, but still found him in prison. Through all of that, through all of the attacks that Joseph faced in his life, he remained steadfast in his ability to function, to be profitable in every situation. And so his arms remained agile. He didn't get bitter. He didn't get overwhelmed by his situation. He kept himself focused on, as Jacob is going to describe here, the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the stone of Israel, the rock of Israel. It's a picture of Joseph's faith. Joseph endured through all of those things because he believed God. He believed God had a purpose. The dreams that he had had, I believe he looks back at those at some point in his travels and realizes God still hasn't fulfilled that. He wouldn't have given me those dreams if he didn't intend to fulfill them. And so God is going to do something at some point. This is going to happen. And I believe Joseph kept looking forward. He kept looking toward the purpose that God had for him. And God gave him strength through all of that. So Joseph's faith is greatly exemplified in his unrelenting follow of God, in his unrelenting pursuit of what God's will was, realizing that God was still working. He hadn't left him alone. And so the picture looks back to the future. So I think in verse 22, it starts with where they are in that moment. And then Jacob takes Joseph back and he looks at what happened to him and how he endured and how his faith was strong. And then we get down to verse 25 and 26, and we start looking at the picture turns now toward the future for Joseph. Verse 25 says, by the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. So now the verb changes when we get to verse 25. He was attacked, past tense, harassed, past tense. And now we switch to the future because it says here, the God of your father who will help. So this turns now to a view of the future. He will help, he will bless, and those pictures look farther ahead. So now we've turned to the future for Joseph. And so he describes God as the Almighty, the one who will help. Not that God hasn't helped in the past, but God will continue. God will continue to help. As Joseph is continuing to be faithful to God, God will continue to bless with blessings of the heaven above. What can be pictured in blessings of the heaven above? And I mean, we're blessed by rain when God gives it. We're blessed by the sunlight. In an agrarian society, rain and sun are huge blessings. Both are necessary for fruitful crops to be grown. And so blessings from heaven makes sense to me that it pictures God blessing the fruitfulness of Joseph's family and his tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, going forward. There will be a blessing from God. Blessings of the deep that crouches beneath. Water in a desert land, which much of the promised land is going to be in need of these waters, the lakes, the ponds, the watering holes that God will provide. Just a picture of God blessing on the earth as well as from the heaven. And then blessings of the breasts and of the womb. Just pictures the fertility of Joseph's line going forward. You can also picture the fertility of livestock as well. Both things could be considered in the statement. I really think it looks primarily at the blessing of God on Joseph's family, its expansion, its growth. And ultimately, we know that Ephraim will become the strongest tribe in the northern kingdom. So the blessing on their growth and all of that comes in the future. Then verse 26 says, the blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents. And so here's Jacob making a statement. It has to be about himself. He's looking at where he is, and he's saying, God has blessed me more than he blessed my father. So my experience is that God's work in my life and in my family has been greater than the work that God did in Isaac's family, in my father's house. And then he goes on to discuss the fact that those bounties, though they were like from the everlasting hills, God has blessed Jacob abundantly. Now he says, may they be on the head of Joseph. So this great blessing that I've experienced from God, that God has worked in my life through my family, may that blessing continue on Joseph. May he be abundantly blessed by God going forward in his life. May these blessings be on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. So because of the unique situation of Joseph, and God setting him apart and using him in this miraculous way to preserve his people for the future, the blessing of God will be on Jacob or on Joseph as it was on Jacob, if not exceedingly above what God did for Jacob, because of Joseph's faithfulness, because of Joseph's commitment to serving the Lord and loving him and walking with him regardless of his circumstance. And so there's a huge blessing to look at when we read the fact that God doesn't forget. He does bless, and he does look with awareness on our service for him, on our love for him, our dedication to him, regardless of the circumstance of life. And that God isn't going to leave us alone. He's not going to leave us behind. He will work according to his will and plan, and he'll bless us. What a joy it is to be able to look at the blessing of Joseph, realizing that he went through so many things. Yet now as his life comes to this place and going forward, the blessing of God is going to become more and more apparent on Joseph's life. And it's just a huge encouragement to be faithful. It's a huge encouragement to trust God and walk with him, realizing that he will be true to his word. And we can trust that with all of our heart. And boy, it's just amazing to look at Joseph's life and see what God did for him. And to look at Joseph's faithfulness through it all, to trust the God of Jacob, and all things working ultimately together for good, for Joseph, for his family, and all the adversity had to come in order for it to happen. But now the blessing of God is evident for Joseph. And so what a beautiful picture of Joseph's life, present, past, and future, in the blessing that comes from Jacob here in Genesis 49. Well, thanks for taking time in the truth with me today. I look forward to seeing you on Monday. It is Thursday, so I won't be in the office tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you on Monday as we come back to see what the blessing will be on Benjamin and look further into the end of Genesis 49 then. I encourage you to be in God's house this weekend. Trust him, walk with him every day. Make your personal study important. Make your personal prayer time important. Focus on the things that God will use in your life to help you grow and be changed into the image of his son. So thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you Monday. Have a great weekend.